blower. Sort of makes sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And that's the list is important because it's a good temporal marker for the appearance of a large number of people, maybe even a fifth or a sixth of the population being essentially awake to the issues of climate change and pan-solar system involvement, galactic alignment, and so on and so on and so on.
I'm glad you brought all that up because I think that's really, really important for people to understand, what some of what you call the temporal markers are. And I'm really anxiously awaiting that movie, by the way, myself. Now, one of the things, I have two small questions here. One of them are that somebody said, I'm sure that the powers that be are aware of Clif and his work. Are you concerned about it?
Am I concerned?
Yeah.
No, I don't give it a thought, really. It freaks George out when he gets into deep monkey mind mode occasionally. But, no, I operate under the theory that, I was dead the moment I was born, and so anything short of that is not a worry, really, It's like, y'all come, where the dojo is, we got open mat on Fridays, I'll reserve space.
Oh, my goodness. Next question we have is, what does Clif think about the pastor in New York that recently blogged about an urgent alert of a calamity coming to the city?
Well, I don't know, but see, here's the thing. Religions, by their very nature, all religions, it's immaterial as to what form it is, go to the idea of control. It's not really so much about producing enlightenment as it is transferring control to the priest or whoever is above you in the hierarchy. And these people that get in there have a tendency, certainly at the fringe level, to get their wires crossed, so to speak, right? And so the pressures of things around them cause them to snap like any of us. And do I think there's going to be a calamity for New York? Sure, but not necessarily anything at all like what's going on there. I mean, the images we have are, water up 40 and 50 feet over most of the city.
Right.
And people trying to live out of the third and fourth floors there for a while, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Somebody would like some clarification about the linguistics that are talking about chemtrails, and in regards to the content of them, their supposed purpose, rather than an attempt to shield an energy from affecting our pineal glands.
Okay, the language itself contains all of that and then some. Bear in mind that the Space Ghost Parts entity is where we collect all of that. So, for instance, I think the last time I looked, there were over 90, that's 90, proffered archetype connections to chemtrails, some of which include changing the albedo of the planet, the other aforementioned guarding against energies causing DNA changes, and we have others, the killing off all the useless eaters, and so on and so on and so on. So we collect all the data. It doesn't really come up and say the way in which the data lays out and the accretion patterns do not really favor any of those 90 explanations. It's not that they're evenly balanced, but we don't have a sure winner if that's the case. So, but what we do know is that we're actually approaching a nexus over summer where the powers that be, as part of the resource squeeze, are going to have to make some real hard choices and decisions. And it may be that they come out and announce that chemtrails exist and that we have to keep continuing even though it involves this sacrifice and so on, or it could be that they simply abandon it. And I don't know which is worse.
Jeez. Yeah, when you put it like that and you start thinking about the sides there, the choices, not any of them are really good, are they?
No, and see, I sit here in a situation where we're having extremely atypical weather, where almost every single week since December we've had at least one snowstorm, and this is just not usual. And this follows a year in which we had no spring last year, and it just suddenly turned into summer for 4 or 5 days in June, and that was about it. We've had impacts already on local farms and crops with all these continuous hard freezes. It's getting stranger all the time, and maybe we'd get a lot more sun if we didn't have the chemtrails. But at the same time, maybe that could be bad because the actinic rays may be so intense now with the squeezing of the magnetics from the galactic alignment that may not be good for life as we know it. I'm just undecided.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that thing, I don't think that we're going to find the answer to that, in my personal opinion, Clif, until the illusion of time passes a little bit, or we get even a little closer to the galactic center when we actually can understand it maybe a little better.
That's only a couple of years away, so, we're looking at 3.5, realistically.
Yeah, but, because this is a first time. You know, this is not an event that has, you know, this is not an event that has, you know, happened before quite like this, at least not in our memories that we're conscious of.
Sure, and with our population and our kind of civilization and that, you're quite correct. It's interesting to note, though, some really absolutely astounding pointers here. There's some wonderment among I've seen it expressed in a lot of the writers as to why the 13 by 20 for the Mayan calendar, the named days versus the numbered days equaling 260, which of course is in sync with the orbit of Venus. But really, it doesn't explain why did they choose 20. You know, why not 13 by 10 or some other number combination, which would have been easier for them to work with. And it turns out that 20 is a constant all through the other calendars of the Mesoamericans, does not relate necessarily to the number of fingers and toes we start off with, but rather may relate to the fact that it takes 20 years to pass through the band of magnetics that is at the ecliptic plane of the galaxy. And in fact, at 2012, we'll be at the midpoint, the point of most intensity. But it's 10 years on either side of that is really the whole process.
It gives me something to chew on there for a minute.
Yeah, I'm curious that they would know that it was 20 years, almost. It's 20 years if we, I think, add 4 more days. It's that precise.
Interesting. So, you know, that opens up a whole other thing. So maybe there has been a galactic alignment before.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, there has to have been.
Yeah, it happens all the time. We have the 26,000-year cycle. We're 26 light years away from the galactic center. I wonder about that. We're at near a 26-degree tilt in the Earth. I wonder about that. But periodically, we go on this up and down journey through the ecliptic plane.
Right.
This is not necessarily good because whenever it happens, whatever is on Earth at that time goes through some huge changes. Part of the problem is that we have to understand that the theory is, from mainstream science and from a lot of researchers who are not mainstream and who have really looked at it, though, that a little bubble is created in reality and it grows to become a black hole, and the black hole expands out a magnetic field that's spherical. And as the black hole starts spinning around and growing and growing and growing, the sphere flattens out and eventually sort of breaks the bubble, so to speak, at the top and the bottom, the north and the south pole. And then as it continues to spin, it keeps widening out until it's just this thin ribbon, and that thin ribbon takes us, our solar system, 20 years to pass through. And we do that every 13,000 years, more or less. And part of the problem is it's an area of absolutely intense magnetics, and we're seeing the effects of that now across the entire solar system. You know, the sun is actually being squeezed so hard by the magnetics that's why it doesn't have the sunspots. And if you check with recent space weather stuff they're talking about, and I think even Richard Hoagland has spoken about it, the red spot on Jupiter is shrunk. Well, it's being squeezed as well. And we're getting into a situation where the impacts of those magnetics are causing all kinds of manifestations all across the solar system and ourselves. And we're still 3.5 years away from the point of maximum squeeze, so to speak. And then we're on the other side, and we can say, oh, you know, glad we're out of that. But it'll take 10 years to get out of it.
Well, and I think part of what everybody has been out there trying to say to people, though, Clif, as well as your reports, is that you have to be aware of it in order for you to be able to maybe perhaps weather it or fathom it.
Yes.
Conceptually, it's very difficult for us to conceptually understand what that feels like, but we're in it. That's part of, I think, what we talked about the last time you were on, which is the speeding up or the sensation of speeding up of time is like speeding through an event. And, you know, as you do it, the energy becomes very intense, and everyone's running around in a state of chaos and intensity, and it's going to get worse.
It's very much like a pressure cooker that way, yes.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it, pressure cooker.
And we may indeed find that the pressure cooker component, the squeezing of the magnetics, is indeed actually physically changing the quality of time. And thus, to a certain extent, I could even buy into the idea of extra energies coming on in and DNA being changed and some of the more outlandish ideas being proffered for this particular nexus in the future. But one thing we need to be aware of is that even NASA lets you know that, when you go up and down through that magnetic field, you cross a boundary where there's all this trapped stuff. And that trapped stuff can be, Jupiter-sized planets, bazillions of asteroids, or whatever. And so we're bound to pick up a few solar system hitchhikers as we go through that area. And that may or may not be a problem for us. They just have no way of predicting it.
Exactly. We have some questions. Now, as I'm looking at these questions, I think some of these, as a matter of fact, I know a lot of these questions that people are asking in the chat box are going to be answered in some of the later reports that we're going to be talking about in parts 2, 3, and 4. So
let's get to it then.
I'm not ignoring those people. I'm just trying to let people know that we haven't come to that point for me to interrupt to ask the questions. The only one that I'm going to answer for the moment, though, or have you answer right now, is let's see. Is there anything in the reports, Clif, about the recent huge increase in space junk meteors? Who knows, falling, and in the increased media coverage of it?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that in the press reports, and if we have an entity called press, but of course we have to be very careful about it because there's the free foreign press, and then there's the controlled Anglo-American Empire press, and we have those clearly separated. In what we call the mainstream, which we'll think of as the Anglo-American press, which is really a propaganda arm of the powers that be, within that subset, we see a great deal of discussion about just that, space junk and so on. But the language around it suggests that there's a great deal being done and a whole lot left unsaid. None of it adds up. The archetypes are coming through as though there are perhaps 3 or 4 levels of duplicity involved in almost any statement involving space debris. So I don't know what that is. I just know that we've got a big mystery on our hands, and it's growing larger within the Space Go Farts entity.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that's going to come out here probably. There's going to be some more definitive that's going to come out with that. I'm sure of it. I'm sure.
Well, we're still really on track for the whistleblowers. The whistleblowers will come out as a result of being laid off, basically, from subcontractors from federal government contracts, and it's going to be a side effect of the economic thing that the powers that be had not really anticipated. At least if they have, they hadn't anticipated would hit in this degree, because we're going to talk to people that are going to be pouring out of various different agencies that have no other way of making money than to start selling their stories. And they're going to do everything they can, and some of the stories are going to be well worth buying and listening to. So I suspect that we'll find out more about what's going on in the hidden world of our occult NASA/Nazi space effort sometime here near the end of summer. We've got indications that it may be as late as August, but I hope not. I was hoping for some summer entertainment.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Besides, the typical movies that come out, right?
Right.
It'd be nice to actually get some information from, the sources and the people who have lived and survived in those things. And I also think of the cleansing of conscience too. People's consciousness and what's going to happen with that.
It's got to be a terrible burden. You think of these poor guys that are paid to sit there and keep their mouth shut and airbrush out all the UFOs and all this kind of stuff. It's got to eat at them over the years.
Yeah, at some point you got to go with a job worth the money.
Yeah.